Hello there. My name's Brandon and I make pictures out of tiny squares. And I just recently returned from vacation, so I've been kind of looking for a small exercise to ease me back into making pixel art and making videos in that. So today I've just got a quick character sprite time-lapse to share. I've been watching this anime series called Zom100 Bucket List of the Dead, and it's been a really refreshing take on the whole zombie apocalypse genre, where it's actually like a surprisingly bright and uplifting and colorful and fun show. So I just wanted to make one of the characters from that series. I've started here by creating some rough blocking of the character form. Normally I'd start this with something that's more like a stick figure skeleton, but in this case she's got a lot of layering going on with the clothing, so it felt like a more useful way to approach this would be just to see how like all the different blocks of clothing are kind of sitting together, rather than necessarily just trying to build this up from a skeleton. So a lot of this kind of begins with just these broad silhouette type of pieces, like for the jacket and the legs and stuff like that. And slowly I'm working these different shapes into place while also starting to erase from them to create line work that can then be filled in with color later. I'm trying to create a pose where she's got one arm bent up with her hand beside her head, because in the series, one of her, I guess, like character traits as far as body language goes, that I've seen a couple times at least, is that she'll kind of comb this little strand of hair behind her ear. So as far as just trying to come up with a singular pose that's somewhat representative of the character, I thought that this could be a nice trait to work in. I feel like the look of this character though is so strongly driven by the color blocking of the jacket. So with the line work phase, I only got it to a point where those major pieces of the clothing are carved out, and the pose is more or less readable, but still in a place where it can definitely be enhanced through color and shading. Now with the coloring, what I'm doing to get started is just picking colors from that anime reference illustration. And the reason for that is because obviously it's easier to kind of take a shortcut like that, and you can't really argue with the accuracy of the original source colors also. But beyond that, I wanted to see how these colors would translate into being used for a pixel art sprite. With pixel art, we're working with more abstract details and heavier line weight for the outlines when compared to that of the illustration. So I was just curious if any of those factors would actually change the perceived, appearance of these exact colors. I've started here by dropping in the initial base colors across the design, and now I'm really getting into the finer costume details and shading using some secondary colors. One of the challenging things, and actually one of the reasons I chose this character, is just the attempt of having to translate this design of this jacket into a pixelated form. There's quite a mix of color blocking, and in the original it's all arranged quite neatly, but this still just presents an interesting issue of having to allocate that space in the pixel design. For example, you can see along the sleeves there's a series of stripes, which I've decided to simplify down into a single line for each color. My approach with visually busy areas like this was to try to pair those busy details inside a broader patch of color that kind of acts like a visual rest or a canvas for that detail to pop off. So the stripe along the sleeve is, in this line, but then that's contained inside this continuous cluster of solid blue, and then a cluster of solid white near the elbow. When you've got a line work design like this, another thing that helps is to color the outline according to the piece of the design that it's meant to be representing. So the best example for this here is with the skin. I'm not using a full black outline there, it's actually this sort of brown tone instead. And this just helps show that that line work belongs to the skin, and it's actually separating it from other parts that do use black line work. Likewise, I've used dark blue to outline some of the edges of the jacket. And again, this just helps attribute that those lines are belonging to the jacket and not the clothing underneath. So in that way, it kind of works with this idea of layering the clothing also. At this point, I started to notice that the face was feeling just a bit squished, so I selected part of the head, including the eyes, and just bumped it up by 1 pixel. And I feel like this new proportioning actually looks pretty good just for capturing kind of a generic anime styling to it. So this has got a little 2-pixel eye with a sort of eyebrow line above that, and you can see how even with this small conformation, this could be pretty versatile just in terms of altering it into different expressions if you were to start to play with that outline a bit. I feel like Mikazuki here is a bit more mysterious and harder to read in her character. So instead of something that's like super expressive, I'm going to go with more of like a flatter, neutral appearance. At this point, I'm making some of those like really nuanced decisions about the placement of like individual pixels and subtle shading and all this. So I think we'll move along to looking at the final sprite, and I'll just share a few of the final changes from there. So here we go. Alright, the final piece of shading that really solidified this anime appearance for me was to shade the far side of the face in the darker color. And then this created this squared off edge where the light and the dark meet, and it's kind of like the point where the nose is. I thought this sort of came together well to be something that kind of captures that typical anime face shape. You might also notice that I've adjusted the colors compared to the original source colors. And that was really the result of my, I guess, experiment or whatever with coloring here. I feel like this did actually just come down to personal preference, where I've made the skin tone a little bit more of a vibrant pink, and also instead of shading the jacket in the dark blue, I've shifted that hue over into a purple, which I always feel just gives the shadows a bit more vibrancy for this sort of coloring. We'll close out with a quick CRT time, which I normally don't do for a single sprite like this, but I'll find some way to pad it out maybe. So thank you for watching, and take care and keep it square.